Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Mrs. Gallaway, and I am very excited to be here with you today. Some of you may already know me. You may have seen me around the school, and for those of you that have not, I'm happy to be meeting you today. And I hope that if you see me around, you will be sure to wave hello and say hi. I would love to see you. So, I've been told that you guys have been learning a lot about fiction and you've been reading a lot of fiction stories, and you guys are really good at telling what a fiction story is. So, today we are going to talk a little more about fiction stories. But first, I wanted to know what your favorite fiction story or character is. And maybe you're like me and you can't think of what your favorite fiction story is. So just tell me one that you really like, one that you've really enjoyed. Um, Recently, I know you guys read about Arnie the donut, and Arnie is one of my favorite fiction characters because, first of all, I love donuts, but also because Arnie, he becomes a dog at the end. And I mean, how many donuts get to be walked around like a puppy? So I think that is a really fun fiction story. Um, so now I want you to share with me by raising your hand what your favorite fiction story or character has been. You guys did a really great job at that. That was really awesome, and I really enjoyed hearing about all of the different characters and stories that you've read about. Today, we're going to talk about a specific kind of fiction story. And so, we're going to play a little video, and I want you guys to watch carefully and think while you're watching the video, what is this kind of fiction story? What makes this story a little bit different? And maybe you know some other stories that are like it that would be part of it too. So we're going to watch it and think carefully about what kind of a fiction story this is. And if you don't know, that's perfectly okay because we're going to talk about it together and figure it out together afterwards. Okay? All right. We are going to watch Little Red Riding Hood. Now, um, what did you guys think of that video? Do you think that Little Red Riding Hood is a certain kind of a story or some things that happened in that story? And let's think about, do we think maybe was it a mystery story? Or maybe you think it was a fairy tale story? How many of you think that this is a fairy tale story? Great job. This is a fairy tale story. Little Red Riding Hood is a fairy tale story. And so, since you guys seem to be so good at knowing what a fairy tale is, let's look at some different characters, and I want you to tell me if they're a fairy tale character or if they're a real character. And while you're doing that, I want you to think about how you know which one is a fairy tale and which one is a real character. So let's take a look at this first picture over here. What do we think this is? Do we think fairy tale or do we think real? You're right. These are fairy tale characters from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Of course they're fairy tale. I love the Seven Dwarfs. Now, how about this one right here? Do we think that this is a fairy tale character or a real character? She is real. That is a little girl just like all of you guys in here. She is real. How about this one over here? Now, this one is what would we say he is? Fairy tale or real? He is real, but he's not a person, right? What is he? He is an animal, but he is a real animal, right? How about this one right here? What do we think? The Little Mermaid is a fairy tale character. Very good. Now, how about this one? Now, I think I heard somebody there say fairy tale, but I most certainly am a real person, although sometimes I would like to be a fairy tale character. But unfortunately, I cannot be a fairy tale character. And you guys are going to tell me in a minute why I can't be a fairy tale character. Why can I never be a fairy tale character? All right, how about this one right here? Yes, that's right. She is a fairy tale character, and she is not a nice fairy tale character, right? Okay, what about these ones right here? Yes, they are fairy tale, and they seem to be doing something very specific that a lot of fairy tales have in them. So pay close attention to this picture and see if you know what it is that they're doing that a lot of fairy tales have in them. How about this one? Yes, that is a fairy tale character. Most of you know that that is Ursula, and she is a fairy tale character. And again, she is not a very nice fairy tale character, right? All right, boys and girls. You guys did a really great job at that. You guys are so good at this. So I think now we can maybe think a little bit about what made these characters fairy tale characters and why am I not a fairy tale character? While you guys think about that, I also want you to start putting together a list. We're going to do it together of different fairy tales because you guys seem to be pros at this. And I think that you probably know a lot of fairy tales. So let's put together a little list of fairy tales. This is a really great list. We have Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid, Cinderella, The Three Little Pigs, Frozen, Aladdin, Rapunzel, Little Red Riding Hood, of course, Sleeping Beauty, Thumbelina, The Ugly Duckling, Snow White, The Gingerbread Man, The Frog Prince, Pinocchio, and Rumpelstiltskin. Wow, that is quite the list. You guys did a really good job at this. Now, we made quite the list of fairy tales. We watched Little Red Riding Hood. We've looked at different characters as to why they're fairy tale and not. Do you think maybe you guys can help me understand what makes these fairy tales? What makes them fairy tales? And why can I not be a fairy tale character? So, oh yes, you're right. There are a lot of prince and princesses in there, and I'm not a princess. Um, and yep, there's the evil queen, and I'm not an evil queen. And that's a very good point. There is magic in some of them. There is magic. You guys are so smart at this. So I put together a little list of what I think the characteristics of a fairy tale are. And you might have some others that maybe we can add to this list, or some really good examples of these characteristics of a fairy tale. But for today, these are going to be the ones that we're going to focus on. And in a little bit, we're going to read a story, and you guys are going to really focus on finding some of these characteristics that I've listed in the story that we read. So these are the ones that I've found that I think are really important in every fairy tale. Every fairy tale seems to have good characters, right? There's usually a princess or a prince, or maybe it's Little Red Riding Hood, or maybe like in The Ugly Duckling, maybe it's the swan. There are good characters in fairy tales, right? But there also are a lot of times bad characters. evil characters, mean characters, scary characters. Maybe it's a dragon, maybe it's a giant, maybe it's the evil queen. There's always a bad character, someone who isn't very nice that's in a fairy tale. There's also, like we talked about before, magic. There's usually some form of magic. Maybe it's a talking tree or some talking animals, or maybe it's fairies that are sprinkling some fairy dust, right? I can't sprinkle fairy dust. I don't have any magic. I wish I had a magic wand. I wish that I could have some magic, but unfortunately, I don't. And so I can't be a fairy tale character. Um, there's always a problem in fairy tales too, and you find that in a lot of stories. There's some kind of a problem. There's some kind of a conflict. In Cinderella, she loses her slipper, and she has got these mean stepsisters, right? Um, Little Red Riding Hood, she had to get away from the big bad wolf, right? To not be eaten by the big bad wolf. There are usually a big problem that is in the fairy tale that our good characters have to overcome in the fairy tale. And finally, there is a fantastical setting. Oh, I know you're thinking, Mrs. Gallaway, that is a really big word. Fantastical, what does that mean? Well, fantastical just means that it's fantasy. It's make believe. It's something made up. It's not real. So, like in our picture, the castle there, are there castles? There are castles around, but the castle that's in our fairy tale story is not a real castle. It's not a castle that we can go and visit. So it's usually a fantastical setting. Maybe it's on an island that's run by dragons. Maybe it's on a faraway island, or it's in the deep woods with the talking trees. There's some kind of fantastical setting that's in our fairy tale. So now we're going to read a story. And while we're reading, I want you guys to think about these characteristics: the good characters, the bad characters, the magic, the problem, the fantastical setting. And I want you to think about them as we're going and see if you can find any of these characteristics in this next story. Jack and the Beanstalk, one of my absolute favorite stories. Jack and the Beanstalk. Let's see. Jack and the Beanstalk by Mara Alperin, and illustrated means the person who made the pictures, by Mark Chambers. Deep in the countryside, let's get to our page here. Deep in the countryside lived a widow and her son Jack. Their cottage was crumbling and their clothes were patched. They were very, very poor. One day, Jack's mother said, "We must sell our cow. Take her to market, Jack, and bring home some gold pieces." And so he set off to town. But before Jack had gotten very far, he met a strange little man. "That's a fine cow," the man said. "I'll swap you 5 magic beans for her." "Magic beans," said Jack. "Are they really magic?" "Magic they are, or chop off my beard and knit it into a sweater," croaked the little man. Magic beans! Jack couldn't wait to tell his mother. He clutched them tightly and ran all the way home. Now let's stop for a moment and think about this. What was Jack supposed to do? That's right. He was supposed to sell his cow because they needed the money, right? Is that what he did? No, he did not. Do you think his mom is going to be happy about that? Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think his mom is going to be very happy that he didn't listen. But there also was a word in there that made me think of fairy tale stories. Magic. Those magic beans. We might be onto something here.